I never thought I'd be the kind of grandmother who'd use money as leverage. But when my daughter Olivia started restricting my access to my own grandchildren, something inside me broke. Standing there on her perfectly manicured lawn, watching through the window as my grandchildren played inside, children I wasn't allowed to hug or hold, I made a decision that would change everything. If she thought she could control my relationship with those children while simultaneously expecting me to fund her lavish lifestyle, she had severely misjudged the situation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Westfield. I spent 35 years working as a corporate attorney, building a reputation and a fortune that would secure my family's future for generations. My husband James passed away when our daughter Olivia was just 14, leaving me to raise her alone. I poured everything into giving her the best life possible: prestigious schools, music lessons, European vacations, all while balancing my career. When she got accepted to Harvard, I felt like all those sleepless nights had been worth it. We had always been close, Olivia and I. Even through her teenage rebellions, there was an unbreakable bond between us. Or so I thought. Everything changed when she met Philip Richardson during her final year of law school. Philip came from what appeared to be a respectable family. His father was a surgeon, his mother a university professor. On paper, they were picture perfect. In reality, they were financially overextended, living beyond their means to maintain appearances. Philip pursued Olivia with a determination that should have raised red flags. Within 6 months, they were engaged. I expressed concerns about the whirlwind romance, suggesting they take more time to know each other before marriage. Olivia brushed me off, insisting she'd never been more certain of anything. "Mom, when you know, she said with that dreamy look in her eyes. I didn't have the heart to push further. Perhaps I should have. The wedding was extravagant, far more elaborate than what Olivia had always said she wanted. Suddenly, she needed a designer gown, a 5-star venue, and a honeymoon in the Maldives. I covered most expenses without complaint. That's what mothers do, I told myself. When they returned from their honeymoon, Philip approached me about a business opportunity. He wanted to start his own investment firm, but needed capital. I was hesitant, but Olivia pleaded with those same eyes that got her a pony at 12. "Mom, this is his dream. If you believe in me, you should believe in him too." Against my better judgment, I invested $500,000 to help launch Richardson Capital. I made it clear this was an investment, not a gift. Papers were signed, terms agreed upon. Philip seemed grateful, promising exceptional returns. Their first child, Emma, was born a year later. I'd never seen such a perfect baby girl. I was there for the delivery, cutting the umbilical cord when Philip nearly fainted at the sight of blood. For the first few months, I practically lived at their house, helping Olivia navigate new motherhood. When she struggled with breastfeeding, I was the one who sat with her through tears and frustration. When she couldn't soothe Emma's colic, I was the one who paced the halls at 3 a.m., singing lullabies until my voice grew hoarse. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom," Olivia whispered one night, exhausted but grateful. 2 years later, James Jr., named after my late husband, joined the family. By then, Richardson Capital was struggling. Philip had made several risky investments that hadn't panned out. He approached me again, this time for a temporary loan to keep the business afloat. "It's just a cash flow issue," he assured me. "We've got big clients coming on board next quarter." I consulted my financial advisor, who advised against it. But when Olivia called me, voice breaking, saying they might lose their house, I relented. Another $300,000 transferred into their account. Around this time, I noticed a shift in our dynamics. Suddenly, my parenting advice was outdated. My suggestions about the children's education were intrusive. Philip began making subtle comments about how grandparents sometimes overstep. When I'd arrive for a visit, Philip would check his watch, noting exactly how long I stayed. If I brought gifts for the children, he'd inspect them, occasionally declaring certain toys inappropriate and returning them to me. Once, I brought Emma a beautiful dollhouse that I'd had custom made. Philip deemed it too extravagant and insisted I take it back. "We don't want to spoil them," he said, while standing in their newly renovated kitchen with marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Still, I bit my tongue. These were their children, and I respected their right to parent as they saw fit, even when I disagreed. For Emma's 5th birthday, I offered to throw her a party at my country club. Olivia seemed enthusiastic until Philip intervened. "We've already planned something small at home," he said firmly. "Just family. No need for anything elaborate." The small celebration turned out to include Philip's parents, his sister and her husband, and several of their friends. I was allocated exactly 2 hours with my granddaughter on her birthday, after which Philip pointedly mentioned they had other plans. The following week, I received an email from Philip. The subject line read, "Structured grandparent visitation." Inside was a detailed schedule specifying when I was permitted to see my grandchildren. Every other Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m., provided I gave 72 hours notice and received written confirmation. Additional visits would be considered on a case-by-case basis. The email concluded with, "We believe this structure will benefit everyone involved." I stared at my screen, unable to process what I was reading. Had my own daughter agreed to this? I called Olivia immediately. "Is this a joke?" I asked when she answered. "Mom, please don't make this difficult," she sighed. "Philip thinks it's best if we have more structure around visits. The kids get so excited when you come over, and it disrupts their routine." "I'm their grandmother, Olivia, not some distant relative they barely know." "I understand that, but Philip feels—" "What do you feel?" I interrupted. There was a long pause before she replied. "I think Philip has the children's best interests at heart." The conversation ended with nothing resolved. I followed their rules, sending formal requests to see my own grandchildren, receiving terse confirmations from Philip's assistant. Even during those precious 3 hours, I felt watched, evaluated. Philip would hover nearby, listening to our conversations, occasionally contradicting something I'd say to the children. "Actually, Emma, that's not how we view things in this household," he'd interject if I shared an opinion he disagreed with. Christmas that year was particularly painful. I was invited to their home for exactly 4 hours on Christmas Eve. When I arrived, laden with carefully chosen gifts, Philip greeted me with a strained smile. "We've asked the children to open just one gift from you today," he said. "The rest will be saved for later. We don't want them overwhelmed." Later, I learned later meant the gifts were stored in their attic, many never given to my grandchildren at all. Throughout this time, Richardson Capital continued to struggle. Philip approached me again for another investment, this time promising board membership and decision-making authority. By now, I'd grown wiser to his tactics. "I'll need to see your financial statements and business plan," I replied. "And I'd like my team to conduct a proper audit before committing any additional funds." Philip's face darkened. "Don't you trust me? After all, we're family." "Trust is earned, Philip, and families should operate with transparency." The audit revealed what I'd suspected. Richardson Capital was failing, not due to market conditions but because of Philip's mismanagement and extravagant personal spending. Company funds had been used for a new Mercedes, a vacation home in Aspen, and memberships to exclusive clubs. When I confronted him with these findings, he became defensive, accusing me of trying to undermine him. Olivia sided with him, claiming I was jealous of their success and trying to control them through money. "Not everything's about money, Mom," she said, conveniently ignoring that they'd been perfectly happy to accept my money until I asked for accountability. It was around Emma's 6th birthday when things reached a breaking point. I'd requested permission to take her for a special grandmother-granddaughter lunch. After 3 follow-up emails, Philip's assistant finally responded that Emma was, unfortunately, too busy with enrichment activities for the outing. Determined to at least give Emma her birthday gift, I drove to their home unannounced, something I'd never done before, respecting their boundaries despite how irrational I found them. When I arrived, I saw Emma playing in the front yard with a neighborhood friend, clearly not at any enrichment activity. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When Emma spotted me, her face lit up. "Grandma!" she squealed, running toward me with open arms. My heart soared as I knelt to embrace her. Before our arms could touch, Philip appeared at the front door. "Eleanor," he called sharply, "we weren't expecting you." Emma froze, her arms still outstretched but her smile fading. The change in her demeanor broke something inside me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I brought Emma's birthday gift," I said evenly, though my hands trembled. "We have a process for visitation requests," Philip replied, coming down the steps to physically position himself between Emma and me. "You know that." "It's my birthday." "Gift, Daddy?" Emma whispered, looking up at her father with pleading eyes. "Emma, go inside now," Philip instructed firmly. "You can see Grandma another time." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she reluctantly obeyed, glancing back at me with confusion and disappointment before disappearing inside. I stood there, gift bag dangling from my fingers, watching my granddaughter being led away from me. "Was that really necessary?" I asked quietly. "What's necessary is respecting our boundaries," Philip replied. "If you can't do that, we'll need to reconsider even the limited visitation we've granted you." "Granted me?" The words felt like a slap. "These are my grandchildren, Philip, not some privilege you bestow." "These are our children," he corrected coldly, "and we decide who has access to them and when." I left the gift on their doorstep and walked back to my car, vision blurred with tears. As I pulled away, I saw Olivia watching from an upstairs window, her expression unreadable. She didn't come down. She didn't call after me. She just watched. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Emma's face, the joy that transformed into confusion and hurt. Was this what my investment in their lives had purchased? Being treated like an inconvenient outsider by my own daughter and her husband? I called my financial advisor the next morning. "Jack, I need to make some changes to my estate planning," I said without preamble. "What kind of changes, Eleanor?" "The trust fund I established for my grandchildren. I want to review the terms." "The irrevocable trust? That's complicated to modify. What are you thinking?" "It may be irrevocable, but there are certain conditions I can still alter as trustee. I want to implement milestone requirements before funds are distributed." Jack paused. "This is about Philip and Olivia, isn't it?" "This is about protecting my grandchildren's future and ensuring my relationship with them isn't severed entirely." We spent hours restructuring what we could. The trust would remain, but access to funds would now be contingent on specific conditions. One being that the grandchildren maintain a meaningful relationship with me, with detailed parameters defining what that entailed. Another condition required financial literacy education before major distributions. A third mandated that any business ventures funded by trust assets be subject to oversight by the trust's financial advisors. I also revised my personal will, removing Philip and Olivia as beneficiaries of several valuable properties and investments I had previously earmarked for them. When the paperwork was complete, I had my assistant deliver copies to Philip and Olivia via courier. Then I waited. The call came 3 hours later. Philip's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "What the hell is this, Eleanor?" "Those..." Are amendments to the trust fund conditions, I replied calmly. As trustee, it's my responsibility to ensure the assets are protected and used according to my intentions. You can't do this. That money is for our children's future. Exactly. Philip, for their future, not for your new vacation home or luxury cars. And part of their future should include a relationship with their grandmother. This is blackmail, he hissed. No, this is consequence. You and Olivia have systematically pushed me out of my grandchildren's lives while happily accepting my financial support. That arrangement no longer works for me. We'll fight this legally, he threatened. You're welcome to try. But perhaps you should consult with a lawyer about grandparents' rights statutes first. And consider how it might look to a judge that you've been restricting my access to my grandchildren while simultaneously benefiting from my financial generosity. There was a long silence before Philip spoke again, his tone suddenly conciliatory. Maybe we've been too rigid with the visitation schedule. We could revisit it. I think that's wise, I replied. And Philip, there's one more thing you should know. I've instructed my financial team to conduct a comprehensive audit of how my previous investments in Richardson Capital were used. If funds were misappropriated, there will be additional consequences. I ended the call before he could respond. Within minutes, Olivia was calling. I let it go to voicemail. She needed time to process what was happening, to recognize that her choices had consequences too. Later that evening, as I sat in my study reviewing case files for work, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Olivia stood there alone, her eyes red from crying. "May I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside to let her enter, maintaining my composure though my heart ached at seeing her distress. "Mom," she began once we were seated in the living room, "I don't understand why you're doing this." "Don't you?" I asked quietly. "You've allowed Philip to dictate when and how I see my grandchildren. You've stood by while he's treated me like an unwelcome intruder. And through it all, you've had no problem accepting my financial support." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "No, it's not fair. None of this is fair. It's not fair that I have to make an appointment to see my grandchildren. It's not fair that Emma's face crumpled yesterday because her father wouldn't let her. Hug me. It's not fair that I've invested nearly $1 million in your husband's business ventures without basic accountability." Olivia looked down at her hands. "Philip says you're trying to control us." "And what do you think, Olivia? Do you truly believe that wanting to be part of my grandchildren's lives is about control?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "The trust fund changes aren't fair to Emma and James Jr." "The trust fund remains intact," I pointed out. "The only changes involve ensuring they have a relationship with their grandmother and that the money is used responsibly. How is that unfair to them?" "Philip says—" "Stop telling me what Philip says," I interrupted sharply. "I want to know what you think, what you feel. When did you start letting him speak for you? The daughter I raised had opinions of her own." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "It's complicated, Mom. Relationships always are. But deciding whether your children should have a loving relationship with their grandmother shouldn't be complicated at all." We talked for hours. That night, really talked for the first time in years. Slowly, painfully, Olivia revealed how Philip had subtly isolated her. Not just from me, but from her college friends, her former colleagues, anyone who might question his decisions or influence. How he controlled their finances despite his business failures. How he'd convinced her that my love came with strings attached, that I was trying to buy influence over their family. "I was afraid of losing him," she admitted finally. "And somehow that meant I risked losing you instead." "You haven't lost me," I assured her. "But something needs to change." "I know," she whispered. "I just don't know how." I took her hand, one step at a time, starting with Emma and James Jr. being allowed to have a normal, loving relationship with their grandmother. No schedules, no hovering, no arbitrary restrictions. Olivia nodded slowly. I can do that. And Philip? She tensed visibly. I need time to figure that out. I didn't push. Some realizations need to come in their own time. But I had opened a door, created a crack in the wall Philip had built around my daughter and grandchildren. It was a start. The next morning, Olivia texted me, "Can you come over for dinner tonight? The kids miss you." When I arrived, Philip's car wasn't in the driveway. Olivia greeted me with a tense smile. "He's working late," she explained, not meeting my eyes. Emma and James Jr. erupted with excitement when they saw me, rushing into my arms without hesitation. I held them tight, breathing in the scent of their hair, memorizing the feel of their small bodies against mine. "Mommy said you can read us bedtime stories tonight," Emma announced proudly. "And you don't have to leave at 5 o'clock, James," Jr. added. Over dinner, Olivia watched as I reconnected with my grandchildren, answering their endless questions, laughing at their jokes, slipping easily back into the grandmother role I'd been denied for too long. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps, of what she'd allowed to be taken from them, from all of us. After the children were asleep, Olivia and I sat in the kitchen over cups of tea. Philip was furious about the trust changes, she admitted. He wanted to call our lawyer immediately. And what stopped him? She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I did. I told him we needed to think about what's best for the children. And what do you think that is? I think they need their grandmother, she said quietly. I think I need my mother. She reached for my hand across the table. I've made mistakes, Mom. I've let Philip make decisions I should have questioned. We all make mistakes, I said gently. The question is what we do once we recognize them. I don't know what to do next, she confessed, vulnerability etching her features. Philip won't accept these changes easily. You don't have to figure everything out tonight, I reassured her. But know this, whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'm here. Not just financially, but in all the ways that matter. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the power dynamics that had shifted with my financial decision. Money had been Philip's leverage, my money, ironically enough. By changing the terms of access to that money, I'd created space for my daughter to question the structures that had been suffocating all of us. Was it manipulation? Perhaps. But sometimes, when conventional approaches fail, you need to use the tools available to you. The trust fund was my tool, and I'd used it not to punish but to protect my relationship with my grandchildren and ultimately to protect my daughter from a man who had systematically isolated her from everyone, who truly loved her. 3 months later, Olivia moved into my guest house with Emma and James Jr., while she sorted things out with Philip. Sorted out became separated. Separated became divorced. Throughout the process, I never dictated her decisions. I simply provided a safe harbor and unwavering support. Philip fought the divorce viciously, particularly when he realized the financial implications. Without access to my money, without control over Olivia, his carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The audit of Richardson Capital revealed extensive mismanagement and personal use of business funds. Several investors filed lawsuits. The vacation home in Aspen was sold to settle debts. 2 years later, Olivia has rebuilt her law career, working part-time so she can be present for her children. She's bought her own home, modest but lovely, paid for with her own earnings rather than trust fund money. The children split time between their parents, though they thrive more in the weeks they're with Olivia. And me? I have standing dinner, dates with my grandchildren every Wednesday. I attend their school performances without having to request permission. I take Emma for mani-pedis on her birthday and build model rockets with James Jr. on weekends. I'm no longer an appointment on a calendar, but a constant, loving presence in their lives. The trust fund remains, its conditions unchanged. Not because I need leverage anymore, but because the boundaries I established were never about control, but about values. About ensuring my grandchildren grow up understanding that relationships matter more than money, that accountability matters more than entitlement, that love shouldn't come with restrictions. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is draw a line. Sometimes, true generosity means attaching strings, not to control, but to protect what matters most. My daughter limited my access to my grandchildren, so I limited the trust fund they depend on. But in the end, what I really did was create an opportunity for all of us to redefine what family truly means. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about being seen, being valued, being allowed to love freely. And in the end, that's exactly what I got. The months after Emma's 6th birthday marked a turning point. Philip began implementing even stricter visitation protocols, while simultaneously reaching out about additional funding for his failing business ventures. Their hypocrisy became increasingly transparent. I was good enough to support their lifestyle, but not good enough to be a meaningful presence in my grandchildren's lives. Richardson Capital was hemorrhaging clients. Philip had made a series of catastrophic investment decisions, jumping on trendy markets without proper research or risk assessment. Several high-net-worth clients had pulled their portfolios, and rumors about the firm's instability were circulating throughout the financial community. Rather than addressing these fundamental issues, Philip doubled down, opening a lavish new office in the financial district with imported Italian marble and custom furniture. One Tuesday afternoon, my phone lit up with Olivia's name. Calls from her had become increasingly rare, so I answered immediately, worry constricting my chest. "Mom," she began, her voice tight with anxiety, "I need to ask a huge favor." "Of course, sweetheart, what's going on?" "It's Philip's parents' 40th anniversary next weekend. We're supposed to host a big celebration for them, but the caterer just called to say they need the final payment by tomorrow, or they'll have to cancel." She paused, then rushed on. "We're a little short this month because of some unexpected business expenses. Could you possibly—" "How much?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. $17,000, she replied, so quietly I almost missed it. The amount wasn't insignificant, but it wasn't the money that bothered me. It was the pattern. The unexpected business expenses that never seemed to affect their personal spending. The luxury vacation they'd taken just last month, documented extensively on Olivia's social media, the new Tesla in their driveway. "That's quite a celebration," I remarked. "Philip's father specifically requested this caterer. They're flying in a chef from New York." She sounded apologetic, but not embarrassed. "I know it's extravagant, but it's important to Philip to impress them." I closed my eyes, considering my response carefully. "Olivia, I'm happy to help, but I think it's time we had a serious conversation about finances." "Mom, please, not now. The caterer needs an answer today." "I understand that, but this is becoming a pattern. Your household income should be more than sufficient to cover your expenses, even with Richardson Capital struggling." A defensive edge crept into her voice. "You don't understand what it's like, maintaining our position in the community. There are expectations." "Expectations that apparently include spending beyond your means while restricting my access to my grandchildren." The line went silent for several seconds. "That's not fair," she finally said. "Those are separate issues." "Are they?" "Because from where I'm standing, they seem inextricably linked. I'm expected to provide financial support without question, while being treated like an unwelcome outsider in your family. If this is about the visitation schedule, Philip is just trying to establish healthy boundaries." "Healthy boundaries," I echoed. Is that what you call requiring your mother to submit formal requests to see her grandchildren? Is that what you call monitoring our interactions and limiting them to 3 hours twice a month? You're making it sound worse than it is, Olivia protested weakly. Am I? When was the last time the children came to my house? When was the last time I was invited to one of James Jr.'s t-ball games? When was the last time I was allowed to take Emma shopping or to the ballet without Philip hovering nearby? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. These weren't questions she could answer because the truth was uncomfortable. I'll transfer the money for the caterer, I said finally, but afterward, we need to have a real conversation about all of this. Thank you, Mom, she breathed, relief evident in her voice. You're a lifesaver. Olivia, I said before she could hang up. I want to be clear about something. I love you and the children more than anything in this world. That will never change. But I'm not an ATM. I'm your mother, their grandmother, and I deserve to be treated with basic respect and consideration. Of course, Mom, she replied, but there was a distracted quality to her voice that suggested she was only half listening. I need to call the caterer back. We'll talk soon, I promise. We didn't talk soon. After I transferred the money, my calls went unanswered for days. When Olivia finally responded, it was with a brief text thanking me again and explaining they were just so busy with party preparations. I received no invitation to the anniversary celebration, despite essentially funding it. The following Sunday was my scheduled visitation. I arrived precisely at 2 p.m., gift bags for the children in Chiu hand. Philip answered the door, his expression neutral but his posture rigid. Eleanor. He greeted me with a nod. The children are in the backyard. I stepped inside, immediately noticing the remnants of the previous night's celebration. Flour. Arrangements worth thousands still adorned the entryway and living room. Empty wine bottles, several of which I recognized as rare vintages costing upwards of $500 each, lined the kitchen counter. The catering had clearly been as extravagant as promised. Looks like the anniversary party was a success, I commented. My parents were pleased, Philip replied without elaboration. The children are waiting. I found Emma and James Jr. playing on their elaborate playground set, supervised by a young woman I didn't recognize. Grandma! Emma squealed, jumping off the swing and running toward me. James Jr. followed more cautiously, glancing back at the supervisor as if seeking permission. I knelt to embrace them, my heart swelling at their genuine excitement. I've missed you both so much. The supervisor approached, extending her hand. You must be Mrs. Westfield. I'm Megan, the children's new nanny. New nanny. Another expense. That apparently took priority over Philip's unexpected business costs. It's lovely to meet you, Megan, I said, shaking her hand. I wasn't aware Olivia and Philip had hired childcare. Oh, I'm just part-time, she explained. Mostly afternoons and weekends when Mr. and Mrs. Richardson have social engagements. Like the anniversary party I'd paid for but wasn't invited to attend. Where's my daughter? I asked, scanning the yard. Mom's having a spa day with Aunt Clarissa, Emma volunteered. She said her head hurt from all the champagne. Out of the mouths of babes, I managed a smile. Well, then I'm extra glad I get to see you both today. I brought some special surprises. We spent the next hour playing with the educational games and books I'd brought. The children were animated, full of stories about school and friends and the enormous cake from the party. I drank in every detail, storing their words and expressions in my memory to sustain me through the long stretches between visits. Megan kept a respectful distance but remained present, occasionally checking her watch. I wondered if she'd been instructed to monitor our interactions or simply to ensure I didn't exceed my allotted time. Just before 4 p.m., Philip emerged onto the patio. The children need to get ready for dinner with my parents, he announced. They're expecting us at 5. But Grandma's time isn't over yet, Emma protested, clinging to my arm. She still has to tell us the end of the story. Plans change, Emma, Philip replied firmly. Say goodbye to Grandma now. You'll see her again in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, an eternity in the life of a child. An unbearable separation for a grandmother who already saw them so rarely. Actually, I said, maintaining a calm I didn't feel. My scheduled time doesn't end until 5. That was the agreement. Philip's jaw tightened. As I said, plans change. My parents are expecting us. Perhaps you could call and explain that the children are with their grandmother until 5, as previously arranged. I kept my voice. Pleasant for the children's sake. I'm sure they'd understand. That's not how this works, Eleanor. His voice had taken on a dangerous edge. This is our home, our children, our schedule. I glanced at the children who were watching this exchange with wide eyes, and at Megan, who had suddenly become very interested in adjusting her shoelaces. Of course, I conceded, unwilling to create a scene that would distress Emma and James. Junior. We wouldn't want to disappoint your parents. I hugged each child goodbye, promising to finish the story next time. As Emma wrapped her small arms around my neck, she whispered, I wish you could come to dinner with us, Grandma. Me too, sweetheart, I whispered back. Me too. Philip escorted me to the door, his movements brusque and impatient. As I stepped onto the porch, I turned to face him. Philip, I understand your parents are important to you, and I respect that. All I ask is that you show the same respect for my relationship with my grandchildren. His expression hardened. My parents understand proper boundaries. They don't try to undermine our parenting or question our decisions. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you've always seen Olivia as an extension of yourself rather than as an independent adult capable of making her own choices. You can't seem to accept that she's chosen a life that doesn't revolve around you. The accusation stung, partly because it contained a kernel of truth. I had been central to Olivia's life for so long, guiding her, supporting her. Had I failed to fully acknowledge her autonomy? Perhaps. But there was a vast difference between respecting her independence and accepting the systematic dismantling of my relationship with my grandchildren. I want nothing more than for Olivia to live a happy, fulfilling life, I said carefully. But I don't believe that requires cutting me out of her children's lives. No one is cutting you out, he countered. You have your scheduled time. Scheduled time that you just shortened without notice. He sighed dramatically. This is exactly why we need structure, Eleanor. You turn everything into a power struggle. I almost laughed at the irony. Goodbye, Philip. Please tell Olivia I called. Again. As I walked to my car, I noticed Olivia's best friend from college, Rachel, pulling into the driveway next door. She and her husband had moved into the neighborhood about a year ago, a coincidence that had initially seemed fortunate. Rachel had been like a second daughter to me during Olivia's college years, spending holidays at our home when her own family was across the country. I waved, and Rachel hurried over, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. Eleanor, what a wonderful surprise! She embraced me warmly. Are you joining us for dinner? Olivia invited us over to meet Philip's parents, so it wasn't just a family dinner after all. More lies, more exclusion. Unfortunately not, I replied, keeping my tone light. I was just having my bi-weekly visit with the grandchildren. Rachel's brow furrowed. Bi-weekly? But I thought, Olivia mentioned you were traveling a lot. These days, too busy with work to visit regularly. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Did she? How strange. My work hasn't required travel in over a year. Rachel looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing she'd stumbled into complicated territory. Well, you know how Olivia can get details mixed up. She's been under a lot of pressure lately. Yes, I imagine so, I agreed neutrally. How are she and Philip doing? We don't speak as often as I'd like. Rachel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. They seem good. Busy with the children and work. Philip's always planning some big business expansion or social event. And Olivia? Is she happy? The pause before Rachel answered told me everything I needed to know. She's adjusting. Philip's world is very different from how we grew up. There are a lot of expectations, a lot of rules. She glanced toward the house. Between us, I sometimes barely recognize the Olivia I knew in college. She used to be so outspoken, so independent. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. Yes, she was. Eleanor, Rachel lowered her voice, is everything okay between you two? Olivia changes the subject whenever I mention you, and now this traveling story. We're working through some differences, I replied diplomatically. But thank you for asking. It means a lot to know she has friends like you nearby. Always, Rachel assured me. You were like a second mother to me in college. I'll never forget that. As she headed toward the house, Rachel turned back. I'll tell her I saw you. Maybe we could all have lunch soon? I'd like that very much, I said, though I doubted it would happen. That evening, I sat in my home office, reviewing the financial documents from Richardson Capital. The more I examined the numbers, the clearer the picture became. Philip wasn't just failing as a businessman, he was actively misappropriating funds. Company money flowed freely into personal expenses. The new cars, the luxury vacations, the nanny, the elaborate parties. Meanwhile, client accounts showed disturbing discrepancies. It was beyond mismanagement. It bordered on fraud. I was contemplating my next steps when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Westfield, this is Megan, the Richardsons' nanny. I hope you don't mind, but Emma asked me to send you this. Attached was a photo of a crayon drawing, a stick figure family holding hands. The tallest figure wore a purple dress and had cheek arm, yellow hair, me, unmistakably. Standing next to Emma and James Jr. in the background was a house that looked remarkably like mine. Across the top, in Emma's wobbly handwriting, I wish we lived with Grandma. My heart constricted. I saved the image immediately, then typed a response. Thank you, Megan. Please tell Emma I love her drawing and I love her. If it's not too much trouble, could you let her know I'll be thinking of her until I see her again? The reply came quickly. Of course, Mrs. Westfield, I hope I'm not overstepping, but the children talk about you constantly. They treasure the time they spend with you. Before I could respond, another message appeared. I should mention that Mr. Richardson checks my phone regularly as part of my employment agreement. I'll delete this conversation after you've read it. Employment agreement. What kind of man monitored his nanny's personal communications? The same kind who scheduled and supervised his children's relationship with their grandmother, apparently. Understood, Megan. Thank you for taking this risk. Please take care of yourself as well as the children. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with everything I'd learned. The financial irregularities, Olivia's lies to Rachel about why I wasn't around, Megan's revelation about the children missing me, and Philip's controlling behavior extending beyond his family to employees. It painted a disturbing picture, one that went beyond mere boundary issues or social climbing. The next morning, I called my attorney, Margaret Chen. We'd been friends for decades, and she'd helped me navigate my late husband's estate and establish the trust funds for my grandchildren. Margaret, I need your counsel on a sensitive matter, I began after we'd exchanged pleasantries. I'm listening, she replied, her tone shifting from friendly to professional. I explained the situation, the restricted access to my grandchildren, the financial irregularities at Richardson Capital, my growing concerns about Philip's control over Olivia. There are two separate issues here, Margaret said when I'd finished. First, your rights as a grandparent. Second, the potential financial misconduct. Let's address them one at a time. Grandparents' rights vary by state, but they generally require a pre-existing relationship with the child that's being unreasonably restricted. From what you've described, you have a strong case. However, litigation should be a last resort. It's adversarial by nature and could further damage your relationship with Olivia. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I agree. I don't want to sue my own daughter for access to my grandchildren, but I need leverage to change the current situation. Which brings us to the second issue, Margaret continued. If Richardson Capital is misusing investor funds, that's potentially criminal. Have you spoken with the other investors? Not yet. Most of them are colleagues or friends of mine. I brought them in, vouched for Philip's integrity. The thought made me queasy. I feel responsible. Your responsibility is to protect yourself and those investors from further harm. That said, going public with these concerns could have devastating consequences for Olivia and the children, regardless of her complicity. She must know something, I said, more to myself than to Margaret. The lifestyle they maintain while the company struggles. She can't be completely in the dark. Perhaps. Or perhaps she sees what she wants to see. Either way, you need more information before taking action. Margaret paused. There's another angle to consider, the trust funds. My pulse quickened. I established irrevocable trusts for both children when they were born. I'm the trustee until they reach majority. And the terms of those trusts? Are there conditions for distribution? Standard provisions, education, healthcare, general welfare. Philip and Olivia can request funds for those purposes, subject to my approval as trustee. Have they been making such requests? Increasingly, I confirmed. Private preschool, specialized pediatricians, educational enrichment programs, I've approved them all. And the trust documents. Do they contain any provisions regarding family relationships or trustee discretion? I saw immediately where she was heading. There's a clause granting me broad discretion to act in the children's best interests, including determining what constitutes their general welfare? Yes. Then you may already have the leverage you need, Margaret said. Without resorting to litigation or making accusations about Richardson Capital, you could simply exercise more scrutiny over trust fund disbursements. Make it clear that your continued financial support depends on reasonable access to your grandchildren. Using money to force a relationship, I said, discomfort evident in my voice. Isn't that exactly what Philip is accusing me of? There's a difference, Margaret replied firmly. You're not buying affection or control. You're establishing boundaries of your own. Your financial support shouldn't be taken for granted while your emotional presence is systematically eliminated. I considered her words carefully. What exactly are you suggesting? Start by documenting everything. The canceled visits, shortened time, restrictions on where and how you can interact with the children. Then draft a letter outlining your concerns about your diminishing role in their lives. Make it clear that while you're committed to supporting their well-being through the trust, you consider a relationship with their grandmother to be part of that well-being. And if Philip and Olivia ignore it, then you become more selective about trust disbursements. Necessary medical expenses, yes. Basic educational needs, yes. But the private tennis coach, the summer in Europe, those become contingent on reasonable grandparent access. It felt manipulative, using financial leverage this way. But hadn't Philip been manipulating me all along, taking my money while restricting my role in the children's lives? Hadn't Olivia been manipulating me? With emergencies and guilt to bankroll their lifestyle while lying to friends about why I wasn't around. I'll think about it, I promised, but I want to try talking to Olivia directly one more time. A reasonable first step, Margaret agreed. Just be prepared for defensiveness. If Philip is as controlling as you describe, he's likely convinced, Olivia, that your concerns are about control rather than connection. Thank you, Margaret. I'll keep you posted. After ending the call, I drafted a carefully worded email to Olivia, requesting a private lunch, just the two of us, no Philip, no children. I emphasized that I missed our mother-daughter relationship and wanted to clear the air about recent tensions. The response came hours later, brief and non-committal. Things are hectic right now. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. Days passed with no follow-up. I called twice, leaving measured, cheerful voicemails about having found a new restaurant I thought she'd enjoy. No response. Finally, after a week of silence, I decided to take a more direct approach. I drove to Olivia's favorite juice bar, where she still stopped every Thursday morning after her yoga class, a routine she'd maintained since college. I timed my arrival carefully, securing a table with a view of the entrance. When Olivia walked in, dressed in expensive athleisure wear, hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail, she looked exactly like the polished, privileged woman she'd become. Yet something in her posture, a certain tension in her shoulders, suggested the confident exterior might be just that, an exterior. She didn't notice me at first, focused on ordering her usual green smoothie. I waited until she'd paid before approaching. Olivia. She startled, nearly dropping her wallet. Mom, what are you doing here? Hoping to catch you, since my calls and emails have gone unanswered. Her cheeks flushed. I've been meaning to call you back. Things have been crazy with the children's activities and Philip's business events. Too crazy for a simple text saying, I'm busy, let's talk next week. She glanced around nervously, as if worried someone might overhear. Can we sit down? I gestured to my table, where two smoothies already waited. My own, and the exact green concoction she'd just ordered. Her eyes widened slightly at this evidence of my predictive abilities, or perhaps at the reminder of how well I knew her despite our growing distance. I canceled yours, I said, pushing the untouched smoothie toward her. Wouldn't want to waste $14. Thank you, she murmured, sliding into the seat opposite me. Mom, I'm sorry I haven't called back. I really have been swamped. Too swamped for the dinner party at your house last weekend? The one Rachel mentioned? The one I wasn't invited to? Her expression flickered between guilt and defensiveness. That was Philip's thing, for some potential investors. It wasn't a family event. Rachel seemed to think it was social, not business. It was both. She took a long sip of her smoothie, avoiding my eyes. Look, I know things have been strained between us lately. Strained? Olivia, I barely see you or the children anymore. When I do, it's under such controlled circumstances that any meaningful connection is nearly impossible. And now I learn you're telling friends I'm too busy traveling for work to visit. A complete fabrication. She had the grace to look ashamed. I shouldn't have said that. It was easier than explaining the arrangement we have. You mean the arrangement where your husband dictates when and how I can see my own grandchildren? The arrangement where I'm expected to fund your lifestyle while being treated like an unwelcome intruder? That arrangement? You're making it sound worse than it is, she protested weakly. Am I? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you brought the children to my house? When was the last time we had a meal together without Philip monitoring every word? Olivia stared into her smoothie, saying, Nothing. What's happening to us? I asked more gently. We used to be so close. People change, Mom. Relationships evolve. I have my own family now, my own priorities. And I'm not one of those priorities? Her eyes flashed with sudden anger. You've never approved of Philip. From day one, you've judged him, judged our lifestyle, judged my choices. That's not true. I've supported your choices, financially, emotionally, in every way possible. What I haven't supported is being systematically pushed out of your lives while still being expected to foot the bill. There it is, she said bitterly. It always comes back to money with you. If you don't want to help us anymore, fine. Just say so. But don't use it as a weapon to control my family. I stared at her, genuinely stunned. Is that what Philip has told you? That I'm using money to control you? He didn't have to tell me. It's obvious. The pointed comments about our spending, the questions about his business, the disapproval whenever we ask for help. You've made it clear you think we're living beyond our means, that we're somehow taking advantage of you. Aren't you? The words escaped before I could temper them. Olivia, Richardson Capital is failing. The luxurious lifestyle you're maintaining isn't supported by legitimate business income. Where do you think the money is coming from? Her face paled. That's not true. Philip says the business is just going through a temporary cash flow issue. The new investors are coming on board soon. What new investors? The ones at your dinner party? Did any of them actually commit? Her silence was answer enough. Sweetheart, I said gently, reaching for her hand. She didn't pull away, which I took as a positive sign. I'm worried about you, about the children. This isn't just about my access to them. It's about what's happening in your home, in your marriage. Nothing is happening, she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Philip is just protective. He likes structure, clear boundaries. Boundaries are healthy. Isolation is not. And that's what's happening here. He's isolating you from me, from your friends, from anyone who might question his decisions or influence yours. That's ridiculous. I see my friends all the time. Under what circumstances? Social events he approves of? Gatherings where he's present? When was the last time you had lunch with Rachel, just the two of you? Or spent a day shopping with your college roommates? Olivia's expression wavered. I'm a mother now. I have responsibilities. So did I, but I still maintained friendships, interests beyond my family. Philip checks your nanny's phone, Olivia. What kind of employer does that? What kind of husband monitors his wife's employees? Her head snapped up. How do you know about that? I hesitated, not wanting to get Megan in trouble. It came up in conversation. You spoke to Megan? Behind my back? She reached out? To me, actually. To share a drawing Emma had made. She had no right to do that, Olivia said sharply. She works for us. The children are our responsibility. And yet Emma felt she needed to secretly send me artwork through your nanny. Doesn't that tell you something about the unhealthy dynamics in your home? Olivia abruptly stood up, gathering her purse. I need to go. This conversation isn't productive. I remained seated, looking up at her. Running away won't solve anything, Olivia. We need to talk about what's happening, with the children, with Richardson Capital, with your marriage. There's nothing to talk about, she insisted, though tears had begun to form in her eyes. We're fine. The children are happy. Philip is just protecting our family. From what? From whom? From your mother who loves you? From friends who care about you? From financial reality? A tear slipped down her cheek. You don't understand. You've always been so strong, so independent. You don't know what it's like. To feel. Trapped? I suggested softly. The word hung between us, neither confirmed nor denied. I have to go, she repeated more quietly this time. Philip's expecting me home by 10. As she turned to leave, I said, Olivia, I love you. Nothing will ever change that. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'm here. She paused at the door, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Something between longing and fear. Then she was gone, hurrying to her SUV as if pursued by invisible demons. I sat for a long time, finishing my smoothie and contemplating our conversation. The anger, the defensiveness, the quick retreat, all classic responses of someone caught between loyalty to a controlling partner and awareness that something isn't right. Olivia was intelligent, educated, and had once been fiercely independent. She knew on some level that her current situation wasn't healthy, but knowing and acting are separate challenges. As I drove home, my resolve hardened. I couldn't force Olivia to see what was happening or to change her circumstances, but I could refuse to enable the situation any longer. I could establish my own boundaries, use the leverage available to me, and perhaps create space for her to recognize her options. That afternoon, I called Margaret Chen again. "I'm ready to implement those changes to the trust fund management," I said when she answered. "And I'd like to review my personal will as well." "Something happened," Margaret observed. "You sound different." I spoke with Olivia. It was illuminating. I can't save her from her choices, but I won't finance the cage she's living in, either. Not anymore. "I'll draft the documents," Margaret promised. "We'll meet tomorrow to review them." As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. Using financial leverage this way felt like a betrayal of my role as a mother and grandmother. But continuing as things were, funding their lifestyle while being systematically excluded from their lives, was a slower, more painful betrayal of myself and ultimately of Emma and James Jr., who deserved a grandmother fully present in their lives. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything: the restricted visits, the canceled plans, the monitoring of our interactions, the sudden emergencies that always seemed to require financial assistance. I created a timeline of Richardson Capital's decline alongside Philip and Olivia's increasing purchases and lifestyle upgrades. I compiled records of my investments, loans, and gifts to them over the years, totaling well over $2 million. The evidence was damning, not just of Philip's financial misconduct, but of my own complicity in allowing it to continue. I had enabled this situation through my unwillingness to set firm boundaries, through my fear of losing my daughter and grandchildren entirely if I pushed back too hard. That ended now. I couldn't control Olivia's choices, but I could control my own. I would no longer be the silent investor in my own exclusion from their lives. The trust fund they depended on was about to get some new conditions that reflected my values as a grandmother and my rights as a trustee. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't even about money, not really. It was about establishing a truth that had gotten lost somewhere along the way. Relationships are reciprocal. If they wanted my financial support, they needed to respect my emotional presence. If they wanted my continued investment, they needed to invest in me as well, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a human being worthy of basic consideration. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Philip would resist, possibly aggressively. Olivia might retreat further before she found the courage to see the situation clearly. The children might be caught in the middle, at least temporarily. But continuing on the current path wasn't an option. Not for me, not for them, and especially not for Emma and James Jr., who deserved better than to grow up believing that love came with rigid schedules and monitoring, that relationships could be controlled and restricted, that grandmothers were peripheral figures rather than essential parts of their heritage and support system. I saved the document, closed my laptop, and gazed out at the garden where Olivia had played as a child, where I had hoped my grandchildren would play one day. The rose bushes James and I had planted when we first moved in still bloomed each spring, 30 years later. The maple tree where Olivia had built countless fairy houses now towered over the yard, its branches strong and unyielding. Some things endure, despite everything. Some bonds cannot be broken, only tested. I had to believe that the love between Olivia and me, between me and my grandchildren, was one of those unbreakable things. And sometimes protecting what matters most requires hard choices and firm boundaries. Tomorrow, I would begin redrawing those boundaries, with legal documents, with financial leverage, with unwavering resolve. And perhaps in doing so, I might help Olivia remember how to draw boundaries of her own. The meeting with Margaret was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived 15 minutes early, my portfolio of documents organized with meticulous precision. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, its reception area tastefully understated with leather seating and abstract art. Money whispered here rather than shouted. "Mrs. Westfield," the receptionist greeted me with a professional smile. "Ms. Chen is expecting you. May I offer you coffee or tea while you wait?" "No, thank you. I'd prefer to go straight in if she's available." Margaret met me at her office door, impeccable as always in a charcoal suit, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. We'd met in law school, both ambitious women in a field still dominated by men. While I'd focused on corporate law, eventually becoming general counsel for a Fortune 500 company before retiring, Margaret had built her reputation in estate planning and family law. Our friendship had evolved from study partners to confidants, our lives intertwining through marriages, children, and now grandchildren. "You look determined," she observed, gesturing toward the seating area by the window rather than the more formal arrangement at her desk. "I am." I settled into one of the armchairs, placing my portfolio on the glass coffee table between us. "I've spent the last 24 hours documenting everything: the visitation restrictions, the financial irregularities, the gradual isolation. It paints a disturbing picture." Margaret nodded, her expression somber. "Before we get into specifics, I want to be clear about something. What we're discussing today, the modifications to the trusts, the potential withholding of financial support, these are serious steps. They will likely provoke significant backlash from Philip and possibly from Olivia as well. I'm prepared for that. Are you? Because once we implement these changes, there's no going back to the status quo. This will fundamentally alter your relationship with your daughter and her family." I took a deep breath, considering her words carefully. "Our relationship is already altered, Margaret. I'm simply acknowledging the reality of what's happened and responding accordingly." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's start with the trust funds." For the next 2 hours, we methodically reviewed every document I'd brought, crafting a strategy that would protect my interests while creating leverage for a more balanced relationship with my grandchildren. The trusts were irrevocable, established, when each child was born, but as trustee, I retained significant discretion over distributions. "The key is to be surgical about this," Margaret advised. "We're not dismantling the trusts or denying legitimate expenses for the children's welfare. We're implementing oversight and conditions that should have been there from the beginning." The modifications we drafted included: educational expenses would continue to be covered, but payments would go directly to the institutions rather than through Philip and Olivia. Healthcare needs would still be fully funded, with no changes to those provisions. But enrichment activities would now require detailed documentation of their educational value. Most significantly, the annual disbursements that had been flowing directly to Philip and Olivia for the children's benefit would now be contingent on demonstrating meaningful grandparent involvement in the children's lives. "We'll define meaningful involvement explicitly," Margaret suggested, typing as she spoke. "Regular unmonitored visits, including overnight stays at your home, holiday celebrations, attendance at school events and activities, regular communication through phone calls, video chats, and correspondence." I nodded, feeling both relief and apprehension. "And if they refuse these terms?" "Then the discretionary payments stop. The trust continues to exist. The principal remains secure for the children's future. But the lifestyle enhancements they've come to depend on would cease." We moved on to my personal will, removing Philip and Olivia as beneficiaries of several valuable properties and investments while maintaining provisions for the grandchildren through structures Philip couldn't access or control. There's one more thing, I said as Margaret prepared to finalize the documents. I want to establish a separate educational trust for each child that activates when they turn 18. Something completely independent from the existing arrangements. Something Philip can never touch. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Planning for the long game. Planning for their future, I corrected. Regardless of what happens in the short term, I want Emma and James Jr. to have options when they reach adulthood. College, graduate school, starting a business, whatever path they choose, without being financially dependent on their parents. A wise precaution, she agreed, making additional notes. I'll have everything drawn up by tomorrow. Once you sign, we can send formal notification to Philip and Olivia. I'd like to deliver it personally, I said. Margaret looked up, surprised. That's unusual. These notifications are typically handled through formal channels to avoid confrontation. This isn't a typical situation. I want to explain my decisions directly, to see their reactions, to make it clear this isn't about punishment, but about rebalancing our relationship. Eleanor, Margaret said gently, that conversation is unlikely to go well. Philip will be defensive, possibly hostile. Olivia may feel caught between loyalty to her husband and connection to you. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for reality, whatever form it takes. I gathered my documents, straightening the edges with precise movements. I've spent too long avoiding difficult conversations in the name of keeping peace. Look where that's gotten us. Margaret didn't argue further. She understood perhaps better than anyone the complex dynamics at play. As I prepared to leave, she placed a hand on my arm. One more thing to consider, she said. What if Philip retaliates by cutting off your access to the children entirely? The question struck deep. It was my greatest fear, that in trying to restore balance, I might lose what little connection remained. That's a risk, I acknowledged. But the path we're on now leads to the same outcome, just more gradually. At least this way, I'm taking a stand for what matters. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I signed the modified trust documents, finalized the changes to my will, and composed a letter explaining my decisions, in clear, unemotional terms. I arranged for a comprehensive audit of Richardson Capital's finances through a discreet but thorough accounting firm. I contacted a private investigator specializing in financial fraud, providing the documentation I'd already collected. I wasn't just planning for a difficult conversation. I was preparing for war, not one I wanted, but one I needed to be ready for if Philip chose that path. Friday afternoon, I drove to Olivia's house with the documents in a slim leather portfolio. The neighborhood was quiet, manicured lawns stretching before stately homes. The Richardson residence stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, its Georgian architecture and perfectly symmetrical landscaping projecting an image of order and success. I wondered how much of their income, legitimate or otherwise, went into maintaining that facade. I'd timed my visit strategically, arriving when I knew both Philip and Olivia would be home, but before the children returned from their after-school activities. This conversation needed to happen without Emma and James Jr. present. Olivia answered the door, surprise registering on her face. Mom? We weren't expecting you. I know. I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but I need to speak with both. You and Philip. It's important. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder toward the interior of the house. It's not really a good time. Philip's on a conference call, and I have to pick up the children in an hour. This won't take long, I said firmly, stepping forward slightly, and it can't wait. Something in my tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation. Olivia stepped back, allowing me to enter. Philip's in his study, she said, leading me through the foyer. Let me see if he's finished his call. The house was immaculate. As always, everything in its place, surfaces gleaming. Yet there was a sterility to the perfection, as if the space were designed for show rather than living. No children's artwork adorned the refrigerator. No toys disrupted the careful arrangement of furniture. Even the family photos displayed on the mantel seemed professionally styled, everyone wearing coordinated outfits with identical smiles. Olivia returned moments later, her expression tense. "He'll be with us shortly. Would you like some tea?" "No, thank you." I settled on the edge of the sofa, keeping the portfolio on my lap. "How have you been, Olivia, since our conversation at the juice bar?" She busied herself straightening an already perfectly aligned stack of design magazines on the coffee table. "Fine. Busy with the children's end-of-year activities. Emma has a piano recital next week, and James Jr. is starting t-ball." "I'd love to attend both," I said, watching her closely. "If that would be permitted." Before she could respond, Philip entered the room, his face arranged in a mask of polite inquiry. "Eleanor, this is unexpected." "Yes, I imagine it is." I stood, maintaining eye contact. "Thank you for making time to see me. What I have to discuss concerns both of you." He gestured toward the seating area with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Olivia, perhaps some refreshments?" "That won't be necessary," I interjected. "This isn't a social call." Olivia sank onto the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Philip remained standing, a subtle power play I recognized from countless business negotiations. "I'll be direct," I began, opening the portfolio. "I've become increasingly concerned about several aspects of our family dynamics: the restricted access to my grandchildren, the financial irregularities at Richardson Capital, the gradual isolation of Olivia from her support system." Philip's smile hardened. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Eleanor, but I don't appreciate your tone or these vague accusations. They're not vague, and they're not accusations. They're observations based on documented patterns." I removed the first set of papers from the portfolio. "These are modifications to the trust funds I established for Emma and James Jr. As trustee, I've implemented new conditions for discretionary distributions." I handed copies to both of them, continuing as they scanned the documents. "Educational and healthcare expenses will continue to be covered without interruption. However, the additional funds you've been receiving for enrichment activities and general welfare will now be contingent on demonstrating meaningful grandparent involvement in the children's lives." Philip's face darkened as he reached the specific terms. "This is outrageous. You're using money to blackmail us into giving you access to our children." "No, I'm establishing boundaries around my financial support, just as you've established boundaries around my relationship with my grandchildren. The difference is that my boundaries are explicitly stated rather than arbitrarily enforced." Olivia looked up from the papers, her expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Mom, why are you doing this? If you wanted more time with the children, why not just talk to us about it?" "I've tried, repeatedly. My calls go unanswered. My emails receive brief, non-committal responses. My scheduled visits are shortened or canceled without notice. When I express concerns, I'm told I'm overstepping or being difficult." I kept my voice calm, factual. "This isn't about wanting more time, Olivia. This is about having reasonable access without artificial constraints." Philip tossed the papers onto the coffee table. "If you think you can dictate terms to us through financial manipulation, you're severely mistaken. We don't need your money." "Don't you?" I removed another document from the portfolio. "This is a preliminary analysis of Richardson Capital's financial position based on the documentation I have access to as an investor. The company has been operating at a loss for the past 18 months. Client accounts show disturbing discrepancies. Meanwhile, your personal lifestyle expenses have increased significantly during the same period." His face paled slightly before flushing with anger. "You had no right to investigate my business." "I had every right as an investor whose funds may have been misappropriated." I turned to Olivia, whose eyes had widened at the financial revelations. Did you know about this, Olivia? Did you know the company is failing while you're spending more than ever? Don't answer that, Philip snapped. This is none of her business. It became my business when you approached me for investment capital, I replied evenly. It became my business when you used my daughter and grandchildren to solicit additional funds while simultaneously restricting my access to them. Olivia stood abruptly, moving to the window with her arms wrapped around herself. I don't understand what's happening right now. Are you accusing Philip of stealing? Are you threatening to cut off the children's trust funds? I'm not accusing anyone of anything yet, I said carefully. I'm sharing information you should have as Philip's wife and as the mother of my grandchildren. As for the trusts, I'm not cutting them off. I'm establishing conditions that reflect my values as their grandmother and my rights as trustee. Philip moved to Olivia, placing his hands on her shoulders in what appeared to be a supportive gesture, but struck me as subtly restraining. Your mother is upset because we've set healthy boundaries. Now she's retaliating by threatening our financial security. That's not what's happening, I countered. I'm simply pointing out that relationships are reciprocal. If you want my continued financial support, you need to respect my role in the children's lives. We've never disrespected your role, Philip insisted, his voice taking on a wounded tone that made my skin crawl with its calculated insincerity. We've included you in the children's lives in appropriate ways that maintain the primacy of our nuclear family. Appropriate ways? I echoed. Like requiring formal requests 72 hours in advance? Like monitoring my conversations with them? Like canceling visits with no notice if something more important comes up? That's not inclusion, Philip. That's controlled access. Olivia turned from the window, her face troubled. It's just structure, Mom. Philip likes things organized. Structure is a schedule that works for everyone. This is control. I held her gaze, willing her to see the distinction. When was the last time you brought the children to my house without Philip? When was the last time we had a normal grandmother-grandchildren outing without time limits and supervision? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The modifications to the trust are effective immediately, I continued, gathering the papers Philip had discarded. I've also revised my personal will, removing both of you as beneficiaries of several properties and investments while maintaining provisions for Emma and James Jr. through structures that will activate when they reach adulthood. Philip's practiced composure cracked. You spiteful bitch. You think you can manipulate us with money? Threaten my business? Turn my wife against me? Philip! Olivia gasped, shocked by his outburst. I remained calm, having anticipated this reaction. I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm being transparent about my decisions and their consequences, something sadly lacking in this family lately. He advanced toward me, his face contorted with rage. Get out of my house. You're not welcome here. Anymore. And you can forget about seeing the children at all now. That would be unwise, I said quietly. A complete termination of my relationship with my grandchildren would trigger several other provisions I haven't yet mentioned, including a formal audit of Richardson Capital that would be shared with all investors and regulatory authorities. His step faltered. You wouldn't dare. I would if forced to that extreme, but I'd prefer another solution. I turned to Olivia, who was watching our exchange with growing alarm. All I want is a normal, healthy relationship with my grandchildren without artificial restrictions. Is that really too much to ask? Before she could respond, Philip cut in. Don't listen to her manipulation, Olivia. She's trying to drive a wedge between us because she can't stand that you have a life independent from her control. I sighed, recognizing the deflection tactic for what it was. Olivia, I've never tried to control your life. I've supported your choices even when I disagreed with them. I've funded your husband's business ventures when financial advisors urged against it. I've accepted the increasingly restrictive access to my grandchildren despite how painful it's been. But there comes a point where support becomes enabling, and we've reached that point. Olivia looked between us, confusion and distress evident in her expression. I don't understand why this has to be so adversarial. Can't we find a middle ground? That's exactly what I'm proposing, I responded gently. A middle ground where I have reasonable access to my grandchildren and you continue to receive financial support. The trust modifications aren't punitive, they're corrective. They're extortion, Philip spat, and I won't stand for it. Olivia, your mother has made her position clear. Now we need to make ours equally clear. I watched my daughter's face, seeing the conflict play out in her features. Part of her understood my perspective, recognized the imbalance that had developed. But years of subtle manipulation had taken their toll. Philip had positioned himself as her protector, her guide, through the complexities of marriage and parenthood. Breaking free from that influence would require strength she might not yet possess. Mom, she began hesitantly, I understand you want more time with the children. Maybe we can adjust the visitation schedule, add some additional hours. Hours, I repeated softly. That's how you measure a grandmother's relationship with her grandchildren? In hours granted or withheld? Philip interjected before she could respond. The schedule exists for a reason. Children need consistency, not a grandmother who drops in whenever she pleases and undermines our parenting. I have never undermined your parenting, I stated firmly. I've respected your rules, followed your schedule, even when I disagreed with them. All I'm asking for is reciprocal respect for my relationship with Emma and James Jr., which you're now trying to enforce through financial coercion, he countered. As opposed to the emotional coercion you've been employing, the gradual restriction of access, the subtle denigration of my role in their lives? I shook my head. You established the terms of this relationship, Philip. I'm simply responding in kind. Olivia moved between us, her hands raised placatingly. Please, both of you, stop this. We're talking about the children as if they're bargaining chips. No, I corrected gently. We're talking about the children as people who deserve relationships with all the adults who love them, without those relationships being controlled by one person's insecurities. Philip's face flushed again. Insecurities? You think this is about insecurities? This is about protecting my family from your constant intrusion, your judgments, your attempts to buy their affection with expensive gifts and outings. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked quietly. That my desire to spend time with my grandchildren, to share experiences with them, is about buying affection? Perhaps you're projecting your own motivations onto me. He turned to Olivia, his expression hardening. I've had enough of this. Your mother has made her position clear, and now we need to make ours equally clear. Either she respects our boundaries, or she doesn't see the children at all. That's not a feasible position anymore, I pointed out. The financial arrangements have changed. You need to adjust your expectations accordingly. Olivia looked stricken. Are you really making your relationship with the children contingent on money, Mom? The question hurt, revealing how effectively Philip had framed the narrative. No, Olivia. I'm making my financial support contingent on being allowed a normal relationship with my grandchildren. There's a significant difference. It sounds like the same thing to me, she said quietly. Then let me ask you this, I countered. If money weren't involved at all, if there were no trust funds, no investments in Richardson Capital, no financial support of any kind, would my access to Emma and James Jr. be any different than it is now? Would I still need to submit formal requests 72 hours in advance? Would I still be limited to supervised visits on Philip's schedule? Her silence was telling. That's what I thought, I concluded softly. The money has always been part of this equation, Olivia. I'm just bringing it into the open instead of pretending otherwise. Philip checked his watch with exaggerated impatience. We've heard enough. Unless you're prepared to withdraw these ridiculous modifications and apologize for your accusations, I think this conversation is over. There will be no withdrawal and no apology, I stated firmly. The modifications stand, as do my observations about Richardson Capital's financial position. What happens next is up to you. What happens next, he said coldly, is that you leave our home and don't return until you've come to your senses. I gathered my portfolio, maintaining my composure despite the churning emotions beneath the surface. Olivia, I love you and the children more than anything in this world. That will never change, regardless of how this situation develops. When you're ready to talk, really talk, without Philip's influence, I'm here. Philip moved to the door, opening it with a flourish. She doesn't need to talk to you alone. We make decisions together, as a family. Something you've never understood or respected. I paused in the doorway, meeting my daughter's troubled gaze one last time. Think carefully about what's happened here today, Olivia. About what's been happening for years. Ask yourself if this is really the life you want for yourself and your children. As I walked to my car, I could feel Philip's glare burning into my back. I had no illusions about what would happen next. He would work to reinforce his narrative, casting me as the controlling mother using money to manipulate her daughter. He would tighten his restrictions on the children even further, at least temporarily. He would strategize about how to mitigate the financial impact of the trust modifications while maintaining his control. But I had also planted seeds of doubt in Olivia's mind. I had exposed financial realities she might have been ignoring or unaware of. I had challenged the framework Philip had constructed around their family life, and I had positioned myself as ready to support her whenever she was ready to see the situation clearly. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a first step toward rebalancing a relationship that had become dangerously one-sided. The first call came 3 hours later. Philip, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. You think you're clever, don't you? Threatening my business, turning my wife against me, using the children as leverage? I've done none of those things, Philip, I replied calmly. I've simply adjusted my financial support to reflect the current reality of our family dynamics. This isn't about family dynamics. This is about control. You can't stand that Olivia chose me, chose a life, independent from your influence. Is that what you tell her? That I'm trying to control her? I kept my voice measured, knowing he was likely recording the conversation. All I've ever wanted is for Olivia to be happy, to make her own choices. But when those choices include systematically cutting me off from my grandchildren while expecting financial support, I have the right to reassess my position. Your money doesn't give you the right to dictate our family relationships, he snapped. Precisely my point, Philip. Your role as parent doesn't give you the right to dictate my relationship with my grandchildren. Yet that's exactly what you've been doing. There was a long pause before he spoke again, his tone shifting to something more calculating. What exactly do you want, Eleanor? Spell it out in concrete terms. Regular, unmonitored visits with the children, including overnight stays at my home, attendance at their school events and activities, direct communication without interference or monitoring, holiday celebrations together. In other words, a normal grandmother-grandchildren relationship. And in exchange, the trust distributions continue as before? The educational and healthcare provisions continue regardless. The discretionary funds for enrichment and general welfare would resume based on demonstrated compliance with the relationship requirements. Another pause. I'll need to discuss this with Olivia. Of course, this affects all of us. Don't think this changes anything fundamentally, he added, his voice hardening again. You've shown your true colors with this financial manipulation. Olivia sees it too. This isn't manipulation, Philip. It's consequence. Actions have consequences. Choices have consequences. You chose to restrict my access to my grandchildren while accepting my financial support. That arrangement no longer works for me. He hung up without responding, leaving me to wonder what narrative he was constructing for Olivia, how he was framing my actions to reinforce his control. The next morning, Margaret called. "Eleanor, we have a situation. Philip has contacted a law firm specializing in trust litigation. They've requested copies of the original trust documents and all subsequent modifications." "As expected," I said, unsurprised. "He's looking for legal leverage." "Yes, but there's more. He's also filed a complaint with the State Bar Association, alleging that I advised you to violate the terms of an irrevocable trust for coercive purposes." That I hadn't anticipated. "He's targeting you now? That's completely unfounded." "Of course it is, and it won't go anywhere. But it's a tactic, trying to isolate you from legal counsel you trust, forcing you to find new representation while he builds his case." I felt a surge of anger at this newest manipulation. "I'm sorry. You've been dragged into this, Margaret. Can I help in any way?" "Don't worry about me," she assured me. "I've handled worse in my career, but you should be prepared for escalation. Philip doesn't strike me as someone who backs down easily." "No," I agreed. "He's not. But neither am I." After hanging up, I sat in my study, contemplating next steps. Philip was marshaling his forces, preparing for legal battle. I'd anticipated this reaction, but had hoped Olivia might exert some moderating influence. Either she hadn't tried, or she hadn't succeeded. Either way, it suggested she wasn't yet ready to question the dynamics of her marriage. For now, I needed to focus on protecting my position and preparing for extended conflict. I contacted the private investigator again, authorizing a deeper dive into Richardson Capital's finances. I reached out to several other investors in the company, suggesting a meeting to discuss concerns about recent management decisions. I arranged for increased security at my home, not out of fear for my physical safety, but to create a record of any attempted intimidation. Most painfully, I accepted that I might not see Emma and James Jr. for some time. Philip would use them as shields and weapons in this conflict, restricting access even further while blaming me for the separation. It was the cost of taking a stand, a price I paid with heavy heart but firm resolve. The chess game had begun, with moves and countermoves, strategies and feints. But unlike a real chess game, this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about creating space for truth to emerge, for balance to be restored, for relationships to heal on more equal footing. In the silence of my study, surrounded by photos of happier times, I whispered a promise to my grandchildren. "This won't be forever. Someday you'll understand why Grandma had to take a stand." Whether that someday would come in weeks, months, or years remained to be seen. For now, all I could do was hold my position with dignity and patience, waiting for the next move in a game with my family's future at stake. 3 weeks passed without a word from Olivia or the children. Each day of silence weighed on me, but I remained resolute. This wasn't about stubbornness or pride. It was about establishing healthy boundaries that had been missing for too long. The legal maneuvering continued behind the scenes. Philip's attorneys sent increasingly aggressive letters demanding reversal of the trust modifications. Margaret responded with calm, methodical rebuttals, citing my authority as trustee and the reasonableness of the new conditions. The complaint against her was dismissed by the Bar Association, as we had expected. Meanwhile, the private investigators' report on Richardson Capital painted an even more troubling picture than I had anticipated. Client funds had been commingled with operating accounts. Investment returns had been falsified in quarterly reports. And most damning of all, significant sums had been diverted to personal expenditures. The Aspen vacation home, luxury vehicles, private school tuition, household staff, all categorized as business development, or client relations. I shared this information with the other major investors in a private meeting at Margaret's office. The shock and anger were palpable as they reviewed the documentation. "This is fraud, plain and simple," said Howard Mercer, a retired pharmaceutical executive, who had invested heavily in Richardson Capital at my recommendation. "We need to report this to the SEC immediately." "And the police," added Diane Roberts, another investor and longtime friend. "This crosses the line from mismanagement to criminal activity." I raised a hand to temper their reactions. "I understand your anger. I share it. But I ask that you hold off on formal complaints for a short time. There are children involved, my grandchildren, whose lives will be devastated if their father faces public fraud charges." "What are you suggesting?" Howard asked, frowning. "That we just let him get away with this?" "Not at all. I'm suggesting a more controlled approach. I outlined a strategy that would protect the investor's interests while giving Philip a narrow path to avoid criminal prosecution if he cooperated fully. It would require immediate dissolution of the company, complete financial restitution, and his permanent withdrawal from the investment industry." "That's remarkably generous," Diane observed skeptically. "Why would you offer him any path to avoid prosecution after what he's done?" I met her gaze steadily. "Because my priority is my daughter and grandchildren. They shouldn't suffer for his actions any more than absolutely necessary." After considerable discussion, the investors reluctantly agreed to my approach with a strict timeline. Philip would have 1 week to accept the terms. If he refused, they would proceed with formal complaints to regulatory authorities and law enforcement. Armed with their agreement, I prepared to confront Philip again, this time with leverage he couldn't ignore or manipulate away. But before I could implement this plan, my phone rang with an unexpected caller. Megan, the children's nanny. "Mrs. Westfield," she began hesitantly. "I hope I'm not overstepping, but I'm concerned about the children. And about your daughter." My pulse quickened. "What's happened?" "Nothing specific," she said, her voice lowered as if she feared being overheard. "But the atmosphere in the house has changed since your last visit. Mr. Richardson is constantly angry, monitoring everyone's movements, checking Mrs. Richardson's phone multiple times a day. The children keep asking for you, and he tells them you don't want to see them anymore." The cruelty of that lie struck me like a physical blow. "That's absolutely false. I've been prevented from seeing them." "I know," Megan assured me quickly. "That's why I'm calling." "The children are confused and upset. Emma drew another picture of you yesterday, and Mr. Richardson tore it up in front of her. She cried for hours." My hands tightened around the phone. "Is Olivia aware of this behavior?" "She was there when it happened," Megan confirmed. She tried to comfort Emma afterward but didn't contradict him directly. "Mrs. Richardson seems different lately. Withdrawn, anxious. She flinches when he raises his voice, which is often." Alarm bells rang in my mind. The situation was deteriorating, faster than I'd anticipated. "Megan, I appreciate you taking this risk to call me. Are you concerned for their safety?" She hesitated. "Not physically, no. Mr. Richardson hasn't been violent. But emotionally, it's not a healthy environment right now, especially for the children." "Is there any way you could bring them to see me? Perhaps during an outing to the park near my home?" "I don't think so," she replied regretfully. "He's instructed me to take them only to approved locations, and he checks my location through their family tracking app. I'm sorry, Mrs. Westfield. I wish I could do more." "You've done plenty by calling me," I assured her. "Just knowing what's happening helps. Can you stay with them? Be a stable presence while things are difficult?" "I'll try," she promised, "but I should go now. They'll be home from their swimming lesson soon." After hanging up, I sat motionless, absorbing the implications of Megan's call. The situation was worse than I'd imagined. Philip wasn't just fighting my financial leverage, he was actively poisoning the children against me, punishing them for their attachment to their grandmother. And Olivia, while not participating in the cruelty, wasn't protecting them from it either. This changed my calculations. The measured, legal approach suddenly seemed too slow, too distant from the immediate emotional needs of my grandchildren. I needed a more direct intervention, something that might break through the walls Philip had constructed around my daughter and grandchildren. I called Rachel, Olivia's college friend who lived in the neighborhood. "Eleanor, I was just thinking about you," she greeted me warmly. "Have you spoken with Olivia recently? I've been trying to reach her for days, but she keeps canceling our plans at the last minute." "That's actually why I'm calling," I admitted. "Things have become complicated between us and I'm worried about her and the children." "What's happened?" The concern in Rachel's voice was genuine. Despite the years and distance, her affection for Olivia remained strong. I provided a condensed version of recent events: the restricted access to my grandchildren, the trust, modifications, the discovery of financial irregularities at Richardson Capital. I didn't share everything, protecting some of Olivia's privacy, but enough for Rachel to understand the seriousness of the situation. "I'm not surprised," she said when I finished. "I've been worried about their dynamic for years. Philip has always been controlling. But it's gotten worse lately. Olivia rarely socializes without him anymore, and when she does, she's constantly checking her phone, anticipating his texts demanding to know where she is and when she'll be home." "Have you tried talking to her about it?" "A few times. She always dismisses my concerns, says I don't understand the pressures they're under, how important their social standing is to Philip's business success." Rachel sighed. The Olivia I knew in college would never have accepted being managed like this. She was fiercely independent, remember? Always the one organizing protests, challenging authority. I remembered all too well. Olivia's passion for justice, her refusal to accept arbitrary rules or limitations, had sometimes been exhausting to parent, but always filled me with pride. She had been fearless in her convictions. When had that fire been extinguished? "I need your help, Rachel," I said after a moment. "Not to spy on her or report back to me, but to be a friend she can trust. Someone who remembers who she was before Philip, who can remind her that she has choices." "Of course," Rachel agreed immediately. "I've been trying anyway, but I'll be more deliberate about it. Maybe invite her for a girls' night at my place, somewhere Philip can't monitor her conversations." "That would be wonderful, and if she happens to mention the children missing their grandmother." "I'll gently encourage her to reconsider the current arrangement," Rachel finished for me. "Not as your proxy, but as someone who cares about all of you." After hanging up, I felt marginally better. Having allies in this situation, Megan inside the household, Rachel in the neighborhood, provided small windows into the daily reality Olivia and the children were experiencing. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The next day, a text arrived from an unknown number. "The park at 3:30. No signature, no explanation, but I knew instantly it was Olivia. The message itself, its brevity and lack of identifying information, spoke volumes about her current state of mind, afraid of detection, of leaving evidence, yet determined to make contact. I arrived at the small neighborhood park 15 minutes early, choosing a bench with a clear view of all entrances. The autumn afternoon was cool but pleasant, golden light filtering through trees beginning to show touches of red and gold. A few mothers with toddlers occupied the play structure, their voices and their children's laughter creating a gentle backdrop of normalcy. At precisely 3:30, Olivia appeared, alone, walking briskly along the path from the direction opposite her, home. She wore sunglasses despite the fading light, a baseball cap pulled low over her face. The disguise was subtle but unmistakable. She didn't want to be recognized by neighbors or acquaintances who might mention the encounter to Philip. I remained seated, letting her come to me, resisting the urge to rush forward and embrace her. This meeting was on her terms, initiated by her. I needed to respect her process, her timing. She settled beside me on the bench, maintaining a careful distance, her posture rigid with tension. For several minutes, she said nothing, just stared, straight ahead at the playing children. "How are Emma and James Jr.?" I finally asked, keeping my voice gentle. "They miss you," she replied, her voice barely audible. "They don't understand why they can't see you anymore. Philip tells them you're too busy, that you have more important things to do than spend time with them." The lie made my chest ache. "You know that's not true." She nodded almost imperceptibly. "I know, but they don't. They're children. They believe what their father tells them." "And what about you, Olivia? What do you believe?" Her hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white with tension. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything feels distorted somehow, like I'm looking at my life through warped glass." It was the first acknowledgement that something was wrong, that her perception had been manipulated. A tiny crack in the facade Philip had constructed around her. "The financial issues at Richardson Capital," she continued, still not looking at me. "Are they real, or just your way of pressuring us?" "They're real," I confirmed gently. "The company is failing, has been for some time. Client funds have been misappropriated. Your lifestyle, the vacations, the cars, the house renovations, none of it is supported by legitimate business income." She absorbed this in silence, her shoulders hunching slightly as if under an invisible weight. "He says you're exaggerating, that all investment firms have cash flow challenges, that you're using normal business fluctuations to control us." "I can show you the documentation," I offered. "Not my analysis, but the raw financial data. You have a business degree, Olivia. You'd see the discrepancies immediately." She shook her head quickly. "I can't. He checks everything I read, every website I visit. He'd know." The admission hung between us, its implications too significant to ignore. This wasn't just controlling behavior. It was surveillance, isolation, emotional manipulation. Hallmarks of something much darker than mere overprotectiveness. "Olivia," I said carefully, "what you're describing goes beyond normal marital dynamics. Checking your reading material, monitoring your movements, isolating you from family and friends. These are concerning behaviors." "He says he's protecting us," she whispered. "That people are jealous of our success, that they'll try to undermine us if we let them in too close." "People like me?" I asked softly. She didn't respond directly. "The trust modifications," she pivoted instead. "Were they necessary? Using the children's future as leverage?" "The trusts remain intact," I reminded her. "The children's future is secure. What changed were the conditions for current discretionary distributions, the extra funds beyond education and healthcare that have been supporting your lifestyle." "Our lifestyle," she echoed hollowly. "The houses, the cars, the private lessons, the designer wardrobes. None of it's real, is it? It's all built on fantasy, on other people's money." "Not entirely," I said, treading carefully. "Your work at the foundation is real. Your love for the children is real. Your intelligence, your compassion, your strength, those are all real, Olivia. They always have been." A tear slipped from beneath her sunglasses, tracking down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, glancing around as if fearful of being observed in a moment of vulnerability. "I don't feel strong anymore," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I feel lost. Like I've been sleepwalking for years and I'm just starting to wake up, looking around at a life I don't recognize." It took every ounce of restraint not to reach for her, to pull her into my arms as I had when she was a child waking from a nightmare. But she wasn't a child anymore, and this wasn't a dream from which she could simply awaken. It was her reality, one she would need to navigate with her own agency, her own decisions. "What do you want, Olivia?" I asked simply. Not what Philip wants, not what I want. What do you want for yourself, for your children? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady despite the tears now flowing freely beneath her sunglasses. "I want peace. I want to stop walking on eggshells in my own home. I want the children to laugh again without being told they're too loud. I want to call my mother without permission, see my friends without interrogation afterward." She drew a shuddering breath. "I want to recognize myself in the mirror again." "Those are all possible," I said gently. "Not easy, perhaps, but possible. And you wouldn't be alone in making them happen." She turned toward me for the first time, pushing her sunglasses up to reveal reddened eyes. "I'm scared, Mom, not just of leaving, but of staying. Of what the children are learning about relationships, about love. Emma apologizes constantly now for everything. Sorry, 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 like a mantra. And James Jr. has started mimicking Philip's tone when he speaks to her, ordering her around, criticizing her drawings, her games. The revelation sent a chill through me. The damage wasn't just to Olivia anymore, it was spreading to the next generation, shaping their understanding of how people treat each other, what love looks like. "What can I do?" I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the urgency I felt. "How can I help?" She glanced at her watch, anxiety flashing across her features. "I need to get back. Megan can only cover for me for an hour, and if Philip calls, the house while I'm gone." "Olivia," I pressed gently, "what do you need from me right now?" She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pressed a small key into my palm. "Safe deposit box, First National, Downtown Branch. Box 427. There are documents inside. Financial records, emails I've secretly copied, notes I've been keeping. Things that might matter if anything happens." My blood ran cold at the implication. "Are you in danger? Are the children?" "Not physically," she assured me quickly. "Philip would never. He's not violent. But he's desperate. The business is collapsing around him. Investors are asking questions he can't answer. Your trust modifications cut off his access to funds he was counting on. He's cornered and he's lashing out in other ways." "Then let me help you leave," I urged. "Today, now, you and the children can come to my house. We'll get a restraining order if necessary." She shook her head firmly. "It's not that simple. He'd fight for custody, use every resource to paint me as unstable, unfit. And he'd win, Mom. He's cultivated relationships with all the right people: judges, police officers, child welfare officials. His family has deep connections in this community. So does yours," I reminded her. "And evidence of financial fraud would significantly undermine his credibility in any custody battle." "Maybe," she acknowledged, "but I need time to plan, to document, to prepare the children." She stood abruptly. "I have to go. Just keep the key safe, and if I call, day or night, be ready." "I'm always ready," I promised, rising to stand beside her. "Always." For a brief moment, she leaned into me, allowing the contact she'd been avoiding since her arrival. I wrapped my arms around her, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the slight tremor in her shoulders. Then she straightened, composing herself with visible effort. "The children," she said, stepping back. "They need to see you. Philip has been poisoning their perception, making them think you've abandoned them. It's cruel, using them as weapons against you. Can you bring them here, to the park?" She shook her head. He tracks our movements through the security system, knows when doors open and close. But Megan takes them to the library on Thursday afternoons for story time. 3 o'clock. He doesn't monitor that as closely because it's educational. I'll be there, I promised. She nodded once, then turned and walked quickly away, following a different path than the one she'd arrived on. I watched until she disappeared from view, my heart heavy with a mixture of hope and dread. The conversation had confirmed my worst. Fears about the environment my grandchildren were living in while offering a glimmer of possibility that Olivia was beginning to see her situation clearly. The safe deposit key burned in my palm, both a responsibility and a promise. Whatever documents Olivia had been secretly gathering, she believed they might be necessary for her protection. The fact that she'd entrusted them to me spoke volumes about her growing awareness of the need for an escape plan. Thursday couldn't come quickly enough. I arrived at the library 30 minutes before story time, selecting a seat in the children's section where I could observe the entrance without being immediately visible. The anticipation of seeing Emma and James Jr. after weeks of separation made my heart race, but I tempered my expectations. They might be confused, even distant, after whatever narrative Philip had been constructing about my absence. At precisely 3 o'clock, Megan appeared with the children in tow. Emma clutched a worn picture book to her chest, while James Jr. trailed slightly behind, kicking at invisible obstacles on the carpet. Neither of them noticed me immediately, focused on finding seats for the story session about to begin. I waited until they were settled, then approached carefully, not wanting to startle them or create a scene that might get back to Philip. Megan spotted me first, offering a subtle nod of acknowledgement before bending to whisper something to Emma. The little girl's head whipped around, her eyes widening in disbelief, then pure joy. "Grandma!" she squealed, launching herself from her seat and racing toward me, picture book forgotten. I knelt to receive her embrace, tears stinging my eyes as her small arms wrapped tightly around my neck. "Hello, my darling," I whispered, against her hair. "I've missed you so much." James Jr. approached more cautiously, hanging back a few steps, his expression guarded. "Daddy said you didn't want to see us anymore," he said, his voice small but accusatory. "He said you were too busy with important things." My heart constricted at the confusion in his eyes, the hurt beneath his words. "That's not true, James," I said gently. "I've wanted to see you every single day. There's nothing more important to me than you and Emma." "Then why didn't you come?" he challenged, the stubborn set of his jaw so reminiscent of Olivia at the same age. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that make it hard for them to see each other," I explained carefully, conscious of the public setting and the need to avoid directly contradicting Philip. "But those disagreements have nothing to do with how much I love you. Nothing could ever change that." He considered this for a moment, head tilted thoughtfully. "Daddy and Mommy disagree a lot," he offered. "Daddy gets really mad and Mommy gets really quiet." The simple observation revealed volumes about the home environment. "Do those disagreements make them love you any less?" I asked. He shook his head firmly. "No. Mommy says love doesn't go away just because people are upset." "Your mother is absolutely right," I confirmed. "And my love for you and Emma hasn't gone anywhere. It's been right here all along, waiting for a chance to see you again." Something in my words or expression must have reassured him, because he suddenly stepped forward, wrapping his arms around my waist in a fierce hug. "I missed you, Grandma," he mumbled against my stomach. "Nobody tells stories like you do." The story session began, and we settled into chairs at the back of the room. Emma on my lap, James Jr. pressed against my side. They were both unusually clingy, as if afraid I might disappear if they didn't maintain physical contact. Megan sat nearby, dividing her attention between the storyteller and the entrance, clearly anxious about being discovered in this unauthorized reunion. When the story finished, The children immediately began updating me on their lives. Emma's piano lessons, James Jr.'s t-ball team, a loose tooth, a new friend at school. Their words tumbled over each other in their eagerness to bridge the gap of our separation. I drank in every detail, committing their expressions and gestures to memory, knowing this stolen time would need to sustain me until a more permanent solution could be found. All too soon, Megan glanced at her watch and shook her head apologetically. "We need to go," she murmured. "Mrs. Richardson expects us back by 4:30. The children's protests were immediate and heartfelt. "No, not yet," Emma pleaded, clinging to my neck. "We just found Grandma again." "You'll see me again soon," I promised, though I had no way of ensuring it. "And remember, even when we're apart, I'm thinking about you all the time." "Can we call you?" James Jr. asked hopefully. "On the phone?" I glanced at Megan, who gave a slight shake of her head. The household phones would be monitored, any calls to my number immediately detected. "For now, we'll have to be creative about staying in touch," I said carefully. "But I promise I'm working on a way for us to see each other regularly again." Reluctantly, they gathered their books and prepared to leave. As they stood to go, Emma suddenly remembered something, digging in her small backpack to retrieve a folded paper. "I made this for you," she whispered, pressing it into my hand. "Don't let Daddy see. He doesn't like when I draw pictures of you." The crayon drawing showed 4 figures holding hands: Emma, James Jr., Olivia, and me, standing in front of what appeared to be my house. Above them, written in her careful first-grade handwriting, "My family." "It's beautiful," I told her, carefully folding it and tucking it into my purse. "I'll keep it safe, I promise." As they walked away, Emma turned back repeatedly, waving until they disappeared around a bookshelf. I remained seated, emotions warring within me, joy at reconnecting with my grandchildren, rage at what was being done to them, determination to find a permanent solution to this untenable situation. That evening, I visited the safe deposit box Olivia had entrusted to me. Inside, I found exactly what she had described: financial records showing systematic misappropriation of client funds at Richardson Capital, copies of emails revealing Philip's increasing desperation as investors began asking questions, and a handwritten journal documenting instances of controlling behavior, emotional manipulation, and verbal abuse. The evidence was damning, not just for potential legal proceedings, but for Olivia herself. These documents represented her awakening, her gradual recognition of her situation. By collecting and preserving them, she had begun the process of reclaiming her agency, her perspective, her truth. I secured the documents in my home safe, then called Margaret to update her on the developments with Olivia and the children. We agreed that while the situation was evolving in a potentially positive direction, it remained volatile and unpredictable. "We need to be ready to move quickly if necessary," Margaret advised. "Have guest rooms prepared for Olivia and the children. Arrange for additional security at your home. Draft an emergency custody petition that can be filed immediately if they need to leave suddenly." "And the trust funds?" I asked. "The modifications remain in place for now. They provide leverage we may still need, as unfortunate as that is." I agreed, though the financial maneuvering felt increasingly secondary to the human concerns at the center of this conflict. Money had never been the real issue. It had simply been the tool Philip used to maintain control, and the lever I had pulled to challenge it. The next morning, I received a text from Rachel. "Girls' night at my place tonight. Oh, says she can come." A small victory. An evening away from Philip's surveillance, in the company of an old friend who knew her before her identity had been subsumed into his. I replied with a quick thumbs-up emoji, not wanting to pressure Rachel with specific instructions. She understood the dynamics at play. She would create space for Olivia to speak freely, to remember who she had been and could be again. Later that day, another text arrived. this one from Olivia herself. Thank you for yesterday. The children haven't stopped talking about seeing you. It meant everything to them. To me, too. The message warmed me even as it highlighted the absurdity of our situation. A grandmother and grandchildren reduced to secret meetings. A mother thanking her own mother for a brief interaction with her children as if it were some extraordinary gift rather than a basic human connection. Anytime, anywhere, I replied simply. I'm here whenever you need me. The wheels were turning now, slowly but perceptibly. Olivia was beginning to see her situation clearly. The children had reconnected with me, their joy at our reunion contradicting whatever narrative Philip had been constructing. Rachel was creating space for reflection and authentic conversation away from monitoring and control. It wasn't enough yet. The situation remained precarious, the outcome uncertain. But for the first time since this conflict began, I felt something like hope, not just for my relationship with my grandchildren, but for Olivia's journey back to herself, to the strong, independent woman who had somehow been lost within the carefully constructed confines of Philip's world. As I prepared for bed that night, I studied Emma's drawing again, the 4 figures holding hands, standing together as a family. Not a fantasy, I decided, but a vision. A future worth fighting for, worth enduring temporary separation and conflict to achieve. Her childish optimism, her instinctive understanding of what family should be, strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about trust funds or visitation rights anymore. It was about rescuing 3 precious people from an environment of control and fear, about restoring connections that never should have been severed, about reclaiming the future. Emma had drawn with such innocent hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new strategic decisions, perhaps new confrontations. But tonight, I allowed myself to believe in Emma's vision. A family reconnected, standing together, holding hands against whatever might come. The call came at 2:17 a.m., jolting me from a fitful sleep. Olivia's name illuminated my phone screen, sending a surge of adrenaline through my body. I answered immediately. Mom. Her voice was steady but tight with suppressed emotion. We need you. Now. I'm on my way, I responded without hesitation, already moving toward my closet to dress. Are you at home? No. The Fairfield Inn off Highway 16, room 214. Come around to the back entrance. And Mom? Don't tell anyone where you're going. The line went dead before I could ask more questions. I dressed quickly, grabbing my emergency bag, packed weeks ago on Margaret's advice, and my car keys. The night was clear and cold, the roads mercifully empty as I drove toward the modest airport hotel where my daughter and grandchildren had taken refuge. Room 214 was on the 2nd floor, facing the rear parking lot as Olivia had indicated. I knocked softly, 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones, our old signal from her teenage years when she'd sneak back in after curfew. The door opened immediately, revealing Olivia's pale face, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. Thank you for coming, she whispered, stepping back to let me enter. The room was small but clean, illuminated by a single bedside lamp. Emma and James Jr. were curled together on one of the double beds, still in their pajamas, their faces peaceful, in sleep. A collection of hastily packed bags sat near the door, school backpacks, a small suitcase, a worn duffel bag. Not much for 3 people starting over. What happened? I asked quietly, careful not to wake the children. Olivia moved to the small table by the window, gesturing for me to join her. Philip got drunk tonight. Really drunk. He's been spiraling. Since the investors' meeting yesterday. They confronted him about the financial discrepancies, threatened legal action. I know, I admitted. I was part of organizing that confrontation. She nodded, unsurprised. I figured as much. He came home raging about betrayal, about enemies closing in. He started throwing things, breaking pictures, screaming about how everyone was against him, how he'd make them all pay. She drew a shuddering breath. The children were terrified. I've never seen him like that before, so completely out of control. Did he hurt you? The children? I searched her face, her exposed arms for any signs of physical abuse. No, she assured me quickly. He never got physical, but something in his eyes. She shivered. It wasn't safe to stay. I waited until he passed out, then packed what I could carry. Megan helped. She distracted him earlier in the evening, gave him more to drink when he was already intoxicated. Smart woman, I murmured. Where is she now? Gone. She quit officially, left a resignation letter where he'll find it in the morning. She's staying with her sister in another state until this blows over. I reached across the table, taking Olivia's cold hands in mine. I'm proud of you. It takes tremendous courage to leave, especially under these circumstances. She managed a wan smile. I don't feel courageous, I feel terrified. I have no plan, no job, no home of my own. Just 2 confused children and a suitcase of wrinkled clothes. You have me, I reminded her gently. You have a support system. The rest we can figure out together. Her eyes welled with tears. After everything that's happened, all the ways I shut you out, pushed you away, you still came. No questions asked, middle of the night. I'm your mother, I said simply. That never changed. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened, and everything yet to come, settling between us. The complicated legal battles ahead, the emotional aftermath for the children, the reconstruction of a life outside, Philip's control. None of it would be easy, but at least now we faced it together. What happens now? Olivia finally asked, her voice small but resolute. First, we get some rest. It's nearly morning. I squeezed her hands gently. Then we call Margaret. We file for emergency temporary custody. We document everything that happened tonight, everything that led to this point, and we find you a place to heal, to rebuild. Your house, she said, without hesitation. If the offer still stands, the children would love it, and her voice cracked slightly. I could use my mother right now. The offer always stood, I assured her. Your rooms are ready. They have been since this began. Emma stirred on the bed, her small voice thick with sleep. Grandma? Is that you? I moved to the bedside, smoothing her tangled hair. Yes, sweetheart. It's me. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Are we having a sleepover at your house now? Mommy said we might. Yes, I confirmed, meeting Olivia's gaze over Emma's head. A nice long sleepover. Good, Emma mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. Daddy's too scary at our house now. I like Grandma's house better. The simple truth, from a child's perspective, brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. I gathered Emma close, whispering reassurances until her breathing deepened again. James Jr. hadn't stirred, one arm flung protectively across his sister, even in sleep. We should go before sunrise, Olivia said, checking the time. Before he wakes up and realizes we're gone. We gathered the children, still half asleep, and their belongings, making our way quietly to my car. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as we pulled away from the hotel, the first tentative streaks of dawn breaking through the darkness. Symbolism too obvious to ignore, the long night ending, light returning, a new day beginning. The drive to my house passed in silence, the children drifting back to sleep in the back seat, Olivia staring out the passenger window, lost in thought. I didn't press her for conversation. She had taken the hardest step already, choosing to leave. The rest would come in its own time. At home, we settled the children in their rooms, spaces I had prepared weeks ago, painted in their favorite colors, stocked with books and toys and clothes in their sizes. Olivia stood in the doorway of Emma's room, watching her daughter burrow, into the purple comforter with a contented sigh. "You've been planning for this," she observed quietly. "Hoping," I corrected. "Planning implies I wanted this crisis to happen. I just wanted to be ready if it did." She nodded, understanding the distinction. "I should have listened to you sooner, should have seen what was happening." "It's never that simple," I replied. "The most insidious thing about controlling relationships is how gradually they develop, how normal they begin to seem. You saw it when you were ready to see it. That's what matters." Later that morning, after the children had eaten breakfast and settled into exploring their new surroundings, Margaret arrived to discuss legal strategy. She brought with her a team of experts, a family court attorney specializing in high-conflict custody cases, a forensic accountant familiar with financial fraud investigations, a child psychologist experienced in helping children through parental separation. The machinery of protection and justice grinding into motion, professional and efficient. I watched Olivia's face as she absorbed their information, their advice, their reassurances. The overwhelmed confusion gradually giving way to focused determination. My daughter returning to herself, step by deliberate step. By afternoon, the necessary legal filings were complete. Emergency temporary custody order, restraining order against Philip, freezing of accounts connected to Richardson Capital. Margaret's team moved with remarkable speed, leveraging the documentation Olivia had secretly gathered, the financial evidence my investigators had compiled, the testimony of Megan about the previous night's events. The judge granted the emergency orders, Margaret reported after a flurry of phone calls. "Philip has been served with the paperwork. He cannot legally approach you or the children, cannot access certain financial accounts, cannot enter this property." "How did he react?" Olivia asked, tension evident in every line of her body. Margaret's expression was grim. "Not well. There was an incident. When the process server delivered the documents. Nothing that will help his case." The doorbell rang at that moment, revealing 2 police officers requesting to speak with Olivia. My heart sank, anticipating Philip's counter-move. "Mrs. Richardson," the older officer began formally, "your husband has filed a missing persons report for you and your children. He's claiming parental kidnapping and emotional instability on your part." Olivia straightened her shoulders, her voice steady as she responded. "As you can see, officer, we're not missing. We left voluntarily due to concerns for our safety. My attorney has filed for emergency custody and a restraining order, both of which have been granted by Judge Matheson this morning." The officer nodded, making notes. "We'll need to verify those orders, but that should resolve the missing persons aspect. However, there are some additional allegations. Mr. Richardson has made that we're obligated to look into." "What allegations?" I asked sharply. "He's claiming financial coercion and elder manipulation on your part, Mrs. Westfield, stating that you've used financial leverage to turn his wife against him, to alienate his children from him." I nearly laughed at the absurdity, the transparent projection of his own tactics onto me. "I believe the documented financial fraud at Richardson Capital will clarify who was manipulating whom, officer." Margaret stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "I'll be happy to provide copies of all relevant legal filings and supporting documentation. Judge Matheson reviewed everything thoroughly before granting the emergency orders this morning." The officers accepted Margaret's business card, promising to follow up through official channels. As they left, Olivia sank onto the sofa, her brief surge of strength seemingly depleted. "It's starting," she murmured. "The counterattack. He'll say anything, do anything to regain control." "And we'll be ready," I assured her, sitting beside her. "With truth, with evidence, with the law on our side." "The children," she worried. "They shouldn't have to go through this, to hear these accusations, to be pulled between us." "That's why we have Dr. Levine," I reminded her, referring to the child psychologist who had visited earlier. She'll help us navigate this with Emma and James Jr., protect them as much as possible from the legal battles ahead. We were interrupted by Emma herself, bounding into the room with a drawing clutched in her hand. "Mommy! Grandma! Look what I made!" The picture showed our house, larger and more colorful than in reality, with 4 stick figures in the garden: Olivia, Emma, James Jr., and me. Above it, in careful letters, "Our happy place." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Olivia said, pulling her daughter close. "Absolutely perfect." "Can we put it on the refrigerator?" Emma asked hopefully. "Daddy never let me put drawings on our refrigerator. He said it looked messy." "Of course we can," I assured her, leading her to the kitchen, where a collection of magnets awaited. "This refrigerator is made for displaying beautiful artwork." As I helped Emma arrange her drawing prominently on the refrigerator door, I caught sight of Olivia watching us from the doorway. A complex mixture of emotions crossing her face: grief for what had been lost, hope for what might still be recovered. The weeks that followed established new rhythms, new normals. The children enrolled in the local school, close enough to walk to with either Olivia or me accompanying them. They thrived in the more relaxed atmosphere, gradually shedding the anxious behaviors they'd developed in Philip's household: Emma's constant apologizing, James Jr.'s mimicry of his father's critical tone. Olivia began therapy, joined a support group for women leaving controlling relationships, reconnected with friends who had drifted away during her marriage. She started consulting part-time for a nonprofit organization, using her business skills in service of a cause she believed in rather than to maintain appearances or status. The legal proceedings continued, complex and often ugly. Philip alternated between vicious attacks, claiming parental alienation, financial manipulation, character assassination, and maudlin pleas for reconciliation, for keeping our family together. When those tactics failed to sway Olivia, he escalated to threatening to destroy her reputation, to bankrupt her through endless litigation, to ensure she ended up with nothing and no one. Through it all, the trust fund modifications remained in place, providing financial security for the children while legal battles raged around them. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The very mechanism Philip had decried as manipulation had become a crucial safety net, allowing Olivia to leave without financial destitution. 6 months after that middle-of-the-night phone call, we gathered in my garden to celebrate Emma's 7th birthday. The weather was perfect, warm sunshine filtering through the old maple trees, flowers blooming in carefully tended beds. Friends from the children's new school ran across the lawn, their laughter a healing counterpoint to the tension of ongoing legal proceedings. Olivia stood beside me, watching the celebration with a smile that reached her eyes, a rare occurrence. In the early days after leaving, but increasingly common now. "Remember Emma's last birthday?" she asked quietly. "The elaborate party Philip insisted on, all those business associates' children she barely knew, the photographer documenting every moment for social media?" I nodded, recalling how stiff and uncomfortable Emma had looked in the formal party, dress Philip had selected, how she'd been reprimanded for getting frosting on her sleeve, how the entire event had seemed designed to impress adults rather than delight a child. "Look at her now," Olivia continued, gesturing toward Emma as she raced across the grass, pigtails flying, face alight with unrestrained joy. "This is childhood. This is what she deserved all along." "What you all deserved," I added gently. She leaned against me briefly, a moment of physical acknowledgement of all we'd been through together. "The court date is next week. Final custody determination." "Margaret says the evidence is overwhelming in your favor," I reminded her. "The financial fraud alone would disqualify him from primary custody, not to mention the documented instances of emotional manipulation and control." "I know. Logically, I know that." She sighed. "But there's still this voice in my head, his voice, telling me I'll fail, that I'm nothing without him, that no judge will believe me over him. That voice will fade, I promised. With time, with distance, with each victory that proves it wrong. She nodded, squaring her shoulders in that now familiar gesture of gathering strength. I need to focus on today, on Emma's birthday, on joy. Yes, I agreed simply. That's exactly what you need to do. The custody hearing unfolded much as Margaret had predicted. Philip arrived impeccably dressed, portraying the successful, concerned father devastated by his wife's instability and her mother's interference. But the evidence told a different story. Financial records showing systematic fraud, testimony from Megan about the controlling household environment, documentation from the children's therapist about their improved emotional well-being since leaving. When the judge granted primary physical custody to Olivia, with Philip receiving limited supervised visitation, the relief in the courtroom was palpable. It wasn't the end of their legal entanglements. The financial fraud cases were still pending, property division still under negotiation, but it was a definitive statement about the children's best interests. Outside the courthouse, Olivia stood in the sunshine, face tilted upward, breathing deeply as if tasting freedom for the first time. It's really over, isn't it? At least this part. This part, I confirmed. There will be other challenges, other decisions. But the foundation is secure now. You and the children are safe, together, supported. She turned to me, eyes clear and direct in a way they hadn't been for years. I couldn't have done this without you, Mom. Not just the legal help or the financial security, though those were crucial. But the belief that I deserved better, that the children deserved better. You never stopped believing that, even when I couldn't see it myself. That's what mothers do, I said simply. We hold the truth for our children until they're ready to hold it for themselves. The trust fund modifications remained in place for another year, gradually adjusting as our family situation stabilized. The conditions evolved from emergency, measures ensuring grandmother-grandchild contact, to more standard provisions supporting the children's education and well-being. Philip eventually pled guilty to reduced charges of financial mismanagement, avoiding prison time but accepting permanent restrictions on his ability to work in financial services. The supervised visitation continued, gradually becoming less fraught as he accepted, however reluctantly, that his control over Olivia and the children had ended. 2 years after that middle-of-the-night escape, Olivia purchased her own home, a modest but charming cottage within walking distance of mine. The children divided their time between both houses, moving freely between them, secure in the knowledge that both spaces welcomed them unconditionally. Are you sure you want to be so close to your mother? Rachel teased during the housewarming party. Most adults try to establish some distance. Olivia laughed, a genuine sound that had become wonderfully common. I spent years being told that independence meant isolation, that family connections were chains rather than anchors. I'm done with that definition of adulthood. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the children were in bed, Olivia and I sat on her new porch swing, watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness. I've been thinking about the trust funds, she said after a comfortable silence. About how you use them. I turned to her, curious about where this reflection was leading. Yes? At the time, it felt like manipulation, like you were using money to control our relationship. That's how Philip framed it, at least. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But looking back, I see it differently now. You weren't trying to buy access to the children. You were establishing boundaries around your own generosity. Yes, I agreed, pleased by her insight. Financial support without reciprocal respect isn't generosity, it's exploitation. I've been teaching that to the children, she continued. Not about money specifically, but about relationships in general. That love should flow both ways. That boundaries aren't walls but necessary definitions of healthy connection. Difficult lessons, I observed, but valuable ones. Lessons? I had to learn the hard way, she acknowledged, but maybe they won't have to, with both of us modeling something different. We rocked gently in the swing, comfortable in our shared understanding. The path that had brought us here had been painful, fraught with conflict and heartache. The trust fund modifications that had seemed so drastic, so confrontational, had ultimately been just one element in a much larger process of awakening and reclamation. "Do you regret it?" Olivia asked suddenly. "Using the financial leverage when you did? Or do you wish you'd done it sooner?" I considered the question carefully, respecting its complexity. I regret that it became necessary. I regret not recognizing the patterns earlier, not finding a way to reach you before things deteriorated so far. I paused, watching a particularly bright firefly trace patterns against the darkened garden. But no, I don't regret taking the action when I did. Sometimes love requires difficult choices, uncomfortable confrontations. "Like limiting a trust fund," she said with a small smile. "Like limiting a trust fund," I agreed. But always with the intention of protecting what matters most. Emma appeared at the screen door, tousled from sleep. "Mommy, Grandma, I had a dream." Olivia opened her arms, making space for Emma to climb onto the swing between us. "Was it a good dream or a scary one?" "Good," Emma assured us, nestling against her mother's side. We were all together in Grandma's garden having a picnic. Even Daddy was there, but he wasn't angry anymore. He was just quiet, and we were all happy. Olivia and I exchanged glances over Emma's head, acknowledging the wisdom in the child's soul. Subconscious. The hope for eventual peace, for healing that might include Philip, but would never again be defined by him. "That sounds like a lovely dream," I murmured, stroking Emma's hair. "It wasn't just a dream," Emma insisted with the certainty of childhood. "It was the future. I saw it." "Maybe it was," Olivia agreed, pulling her daughter closer. "Maybe it was." As Emma drifted back to sleep between us, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment of quiet contentment. When I modified those trust funds 2 years ago, I couldn't have predicted exactly where the decision would lead. I only knew that I couldn't continue enabling a situation that was harming the people I loved most. The financial leverage had been necessary, but insufficient on its own. It had created an opening, a crack in the facade. But Olivia's courage, the children's resilience, the support of friends and professionals, all had been essential to transforming that small beginning into lasting change. This, I realized, was the true power of boundaries, of conditional support. Not to control or manipulate, but to create space for better possibilities, to interrupt destructive patterns, to shine light on truths that have been hidden or denied. My daughter had limited my visits with my grandchildren, so I had limited the trust fund they depended on. A simple equation of consequence and response. But the real story, the human story beneath the financial maneuvering, had been about reclaiming connections that should never have been restricted in the first place. A grandmother's love for her grandchildren, a mother's bond with her daughter, a woman's relationship with her authentic self. As the fireflies continued their luminous dance through the summer night, I offered a silent prayer of gratitude for second chances, for hard-won wisdom, for the courage to draw lines when necessary, and the grace to welcome healing when it finally arrives. Some boundaries are made to be enforced, others exist only to be transcended by love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.